Before the blood dried on the third floor hallway of Billings Senior High, the evidence had already been posted online. On the evening of January 13, 2026, a lockdown alert shattered the routine of an after-hours school night, but what investigators found on Kaylie's phone and social media accounts would prove far more chilling than the scene itself. Behind a curated TikTok following and a series of disturbing Pinterest boards lay the digital blueprint of an attack that was never random, never impulsive, and never meant to be a secret. Before we get to the video, if you are new to the channel, if you like the content, if you like the analysis, do subscribe to the channel and like the video. Now let's get back to the video. The clock on the third floor of Billings Senior High read 4:23 p.m. on January 13, 2026. The official school day had ended, but the building was far from empty. Below, in the common areas and gymnasiums, families and students were moving through scheduled events. The atmosphere was typical for a Tuesday afternoon, energetic, loud, and unguarded. On the third floor, however, that normality shattered. An altercation erupted inside a math classroom, breaking the relative quiet of the upper hallway. Jason Rader, a math teacher, found himself in a desperate struggle. The violence was not a shoving match or a heated argument that got out of hand. It was a stabbing. Rader, realizing the immediacy of the threat, managed to break away from his attacker. He didn't run for the exit immediately. He ran for population. Bleeding and in panic, he fled his classroom and dashed down the hall to another room. This room was full of students. His arrival, bloody, terrified, and pursued by violence, transformed a study hall or club meeting into a crime scene in seconds. The school went into immediate lockdown. Doors were locked, lights were cut, students huddled under desks, confused and terrified as the reality of a weapon inside the building set in. The suspect did not flee the scene. As police units converged on the school, sirens wailing through the Billings streets, they found a second victim. It was Kaylie, an 18-year-old student at the school. She had not just attacked Rader in the chaotic aftermath, she had turned the knife on herself. She suffered 3 stab wounds, self-inflicted. The nature of these wounds suggested a level of intent that went beyond a suicide attempt in the traditional sense. It mirrored the violence she had allegedly perpetrated on her teacher. Both Rader and Kaylie were transported to local hospitals. The updates from the medical staff were cautiously optimistic. Both were expected to survive. This physical survival, however, only opened the door to one more complicated investigation. The crime was contained, the suspect was in custody, but the motive was a blank slate. Why would an 18-year-old student on the verge of adulthood attack a math teacher with such a lethal force? The why became the central focus of the investigation, shifting the gaze from the third floor hallway to the digital world where Kaylie spent much of her life. In the hours following the stabbing, as the school was swept for evidence and parents frantically texted their children, the internet began its own investigation. Kaylie was not a ghost in the system. She was a digital native with a significant footprint. She was a presence on TikTok, boasting 78,000 followers. Her content was seemingly benign, curated around a specific aesthetic, 90s-inspired outfits, fashion trends, and the typical lifestyle content of a generation raised on smartphones. To her followers, she was a style icon, a peer expressing herself through vintage fashion. This public persona made the violence of afternoon jarring. The contrast between the 90s aesthetic girl and the suspect in a stabbing case created a dissonance that the internet rushed to resolve. People began to dig. They scrolled back through her posts looking for a crack in the facade, a sign of the violence to come. What they found was not a direct threat posted to Twitter, which is known as X, as you all know, but a disturbing trial of fixation on platforms that operate with less visibility than the main feeds, specifically Pinterest. The most chilling discovery was not on her main TikTok feed, but buried in her Pinterest boards. Investigators and online sleuths uncovered boards that painted a picture of dangerous fixation. One board was titled, "Let's Make Love with Our Teachers." While teenage crushes on educators are a known phenomenon, usually dismissed as infatuation, the explicit nature of this title, combined with violence of the attack, suggested a pathological inability to distinguish between fantasy and reality. More disturbing was a second board titled, "Literally Me." The content here was not fashion or food but idolization of a convicted murderer. The board featured numerous images of Jordi Arias, convicted in 2013 for the brutal murder of her boyfriend Travis Alexander, is a figure not of romance but of obsessive lethal jealousy. One specific image on Kaylie's board showed Arias powdering her nose in prison, a snapshot of a woman who killed her lover and was now serving a life sentence. By tagging these images as literally me, Kaylie was engaging in a form of identification that went beyond mere fascination. She was aligning her own identity with that of Jordi, who was sexually and extreme violence to solve interpersonal conflicts. The Pinterest boards provided a static look into her mind, but her TikTok comments offered a dynamic narrative to her perceived reality. The internet uncovered comments she had left on other videos, interactions that now read like confessions in hindsight. On a video captioned, "I need a relationship with my teacher like this," Kaylie commented, "No, it's traumatizing." This comment is a study in contradiction. On the surface, it dismisses the romanticized idea of a teacher-student relationship as traumatizing, yet the depth of her engagement with the topic seeking out of this content, pausing to comment, suggests she was deeply entrenched in the fantasy. Another comment was even more explicit. On a video with the caption, "How it felt when I got home after he showed me how got for me in class." This was the title of the video. Kaylie replied, "I am so sorry, girl. I have experienced this exactly." This comment is a critical piece of the puzzle. It claims experience. It validates the narrative of a mutual, inappropriate sexual tension. Whether this statement was factual, a delusion, or a bid for clout in the comment section is the core question for investigators. It suggests that in Kaylie's mind, she was living narrative that mirrored the darkest corners of teacher-student romance fiction. She wasn't just observing these scenarios, she cast herself as a protagonist. The discovery of these digital artifacts fueled a firestorm of rumors within the Billings community and online. The central debate was the nature of the relationship between Kaylie and Jason Rader. It was unclear if Rader was even Kaylie's math teacher. If he wasn't, the fixation became even more random and terrifying. If he was, the dynamic shifts to a potential failure of professional boundaries or a misinterpretation of necessary academic interaction. Some rumors circulated that the two were involved romantically. These rumors likely stemmed from Kaylie's own comments and the Jordi Arias narrative, which relies heavily on the twisted concept of a love affair gone wrong. Others suggested the opposite, that Kaylie had a dangerous, one-sided obsession. The Jordi comparison supports the latter theory. Arias claimed a relationship with Travis Alexander that was largely disputed by the evidence available, painting herself as a spurned lover to justify her rage. If Kaylie was modeling herself after Arias, the relationship she claimed in TikTok comments might have been entirely one-sided, a fantasy that she tried to force into reality through violence. Understanding the timeline is crucial to understanding the stakes. The attack happened at 4:23 p.m. This is not the start of the school day. It is the end. It is the time when extracurricular activities are in full swing. The fact that numerous students and families were present for scheduled events means the potential for collateral damage was high. Rader's decision to run into classroom full of students was a tactical gamble. He led a violent attacker towards populated room, but he also ran towards witnesses and potential help. It was a move of pure instinct. The lockdown that followed affected not just the students in the immediate vicinity, but everyone in the building. Parents who had arrived to pick up their kids or attend an event found themselves locked outside or sheltering in place inside. The psychological impact on the student body is compounded by the setting. A lockdown during the day is scary. A lockdown after school, when the sun might be setting and the energy is different, creates a sense that safety is an illusion, that violence does not adhere to a schedule. As of the latest updates, the investigation is ongoing. The police are likely combing through Rader's emails, texts, and grade books to see if there is communication and connection that corroborates Kaylie's digital narrative. They are looking for the trigger that happened on January 13 that pushed the fantasy into violence. Was there a failing grade, a rejected conversation, a disciplinary action, or something like that? The Jordi Arias Pinterest board suggested a premeditated desire to kill. People do not usually create Pinterest boards idolizing murderers and then engage in spontaneous violence. This was likely planned act, or at least an act that had been rehearsed in the theater of her mind for a long time. The stabbing of herself adds another layer. In the Jordi Arias case, the aftermath involved a complex cover-up. In Kaylie's case, the self-stabbing suggests a a moment of ultimate despair or a desire to punish herself for the act, or perhaps a bit to make herself a victim in the narrative as well. It ensures that she is not just a perpetrator but also a casualty of the relationship. The internet role in this case cannot be understated. Before the police had likely finished their initial reports, thousands of people had sliced up Kaylie's personality. They found the 90s outfits, the Pinterest boards, the comments. This internet autopsy is harsh and often inaccurate, but it provides a stream of data that traditional investigators might miss. It frames the suspect not as a stranger, but as a product of a specific subculture, one that romanticized toxic relationships and true crime. The focus on the literally me Jordy board is the most damning evidence of intent currently available to the public. It strips away the defense of a momentary lapse of judgment. It reveals a mindset that had consumed violent media and found it relatable. It connects the 2026 stabbing in the Billings to the legacy of violence from 2008, showing how these cultural touchstones of true crime can inspire imitation in vulnerable individuals. For Jason Rader, the physical recovery is only the first step. He survived the attack, but his career and his sense of safety in the classroom are forever altered. If the rumors of romantic involvement are false, he is a victim of a terrifying random violence. If there is any grain of truth to the rumors of an obsession, he is a victim of a predatory dynamic that he failed to spot. The court of public opinion is already trying him based on TikTok comments of his attacker. Rader ran into a room full of students. Those students saw him bleeding. They saw the fear in his eyes. That image will define the remainder of the school year for Billings Senior High. The district now faces the monumental task of healing community that has been traumatized not just by violence but by the spicy details of the motive leaking out in real time. Kaylie, being a teen, faces the justice system as an adult. The charges will likely be severe. The self-inflicted wounds complicate her detention and ability to stand trial in the short term, but they do not absolve her of the attack on Rader. The prosecution will undoubtedly use the Pinterest boards and TikTok comments as an evidence of premeditation and motive. They paint a picture of suspect who was obsessed with the idea of a dangerous teacher-student romance and sought to enact it. The defense might pivot toward mental health, the identification with Jordy Arias, the fixation on traumatizing relationships, and the self-harm all point to a deeply disturbed psychological state. However, the specificity of the violence using a knife, the location of the attack, makes an insanity defense difficult. The planning evidenced by the social media profile suggests she knew what she was doing and wanted to do it. The stabbing of Jason by Kaylie is a tragedy born of the digital age. It is a case where the line between fantasy, internet persona, and the violent reality blur to the point of no return. The lockdown has lifted, but the questions about how a student could spiral into such a violent obsession remain. That is all for today's video. If you like the content, do leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in next video. Until then, goodbye and good night.